and welcome to another episode of the Alpha Movement Podcast. My name is Tom Foxley, and on today's show I am joined by the genius that is Brandon Powell. This is the first interview style podcast I've done in a while, and frankly I've been really looking forward to it. Now, Brandon's take on life is something that I know is going to enhance your perspective. That is because it is so different and so deep in comparison to where a lot of us operate. And I say us because it's very different to me as well. And I think that's the genius of this man. He may say some things that are, let's say, outside of your normal frame of reference. For example, he talks about psychoactive drugs, and we talk about different levels of consciousness. And the reason I think, like, you may be thinking, yeah, I'm just a CrossFit athlete, I'm in here to get better at performing functional fitness. But this type of thing is a really interesting way to open up your mind, and there's so many gems in here. It's really brilliant. To give you an insight into who Brandon is, he has gone through, as you'll hear, he went through a really interesting time to begin with, but he is currently a Wim Hof instructor. He instructs the instructors. He's a good friend of Casper van der Meulen and Mark England, who have previously been on the shows. He is a Brazilian Jiu Jitsu black belt, as well as a facility owner, a dojo owner, which you'll talk about, the Mind and Body Dojo. He's really just a fantastic guy with a ton of experience and a really interesting perspective on life. So whilst this may get wayward for you, there's some super practical information in here too, such as how to regulate your nervous system, how to adapt and use cold water and breath work, and all these kind of things which you see, which are in right now. They're in vogue right now. But yeah, this is a really good interview, and I really hope you enjoy the show. And so welcome to the show.
Thank you, man. Thanks for having me.
No worries. I think I've been trying to think about how to come into this subject, and I've been looking at the way that your achievements and what you've spent your time doing are so varied and so multifaceted. And I thought I'd come at you with a super obtuse angle as well. So let's go for where did you grow up? And for, like, considering I'm completely got very little experience of the US and not much. Tell me about your childhood and growing up.
Well, I was born and raised in Richmond, Virginia, and that is, considered to be southern United States. Virginia likes to consider itself right at the top of what they call the Mason-Dixon line, so it's like what determines what is north and what is south. And so we were just, I was actually pretty much raised in where the heart of this controversy has been going on about the monuments and the Charlottesville thing with the guys with the tiki torches. If you paid attention to that in the news, it was basically this sort of racist uprising event, these protests that took place, and there were these clashes and whatnot. It made national news. I'm sure it was international as well. And so I grew up in that in the heart of that area, and interestingly enough, never really had racism or anything like that too present in my life. Luckily, grew up with a lot of multicultural friends and was introduced to a lot of culture via my family. So I got to not be overly subjected to idiocy. And so I was raised in Richmond, and then I've kind of been all around in the South somewhat. I currently live in North Carolina now, which is a state below, and I but I've lived out west. I've lived in various places. So, I've had the ability to see the United States pretty completely. I travel as much as I can, and it's, so I don't feel limited. A lot of people have a hard time pigeonholing me for exactly where I'm from until I get relaxed. And then I think the Southern accent starts to bleed through a little bit, but, it's, Richmond was a interesting place to grow up. Very segregated now that I think about it in retrospect, but the culture there, I guess, is, basically just like anywhere USA, especially now. It just reminds me of anywhere when I go there, except that we have, some monuments or something somewhere that probably don't really bother very many people, but they, it's something that the media can work on. Mm-hmm. And I feel that it's, I can understand why it could be symbolically torturous for some people that have to be around those. So, I don't know what I think about the whole situation. It's still kind of present because I go home and it's still around. But, other than that, I think maybe I've lost track of exactly what we were, where we were going with it.
I just wanted to get to background because the area that I was kind of getting to was what was going through in school when you were like, I've been speaking to Mark England, as you know, and he talked about a 6th grade disruptive class. Talk to me about that.
Well, I guess, we could back up a little bit and just say that, there were certain factors that brought me to how I grew up, and Mark and I shared a 6th grade class that was for, I think, hyper disorganized children. It was before ADHD or ADD was really on the scene as being a massive culprit, but I would say that it was more, at this point in my life, like a learned behavior. When I look back at how I was raised and how, things that we were going through, I'm not sure there was a lot of time to learn organization highly, but, so Mark and I ended up in this class, and we were, I think, pigeonholed in a way. And it's not just the subject material was all the same that any other kid our age was learning. It was just that we were learning with less instructors, which actually was supposed to help you learn. And I think that that's actually a really good idea in some ways, but we were learning with less instructors, and we had more time together as a group. So we stayed together as a particular group, and this was supposed to help us. But I think it made some of us feel like we were in some type of remedial type of class. And it might have brought out, knowing Mark and the things that he went through as a youngster and how they're very parallel to the things that I was going through, and how we spent several years together as children, and then there was distance between us because I moved away. So 4 years we didn't see each other. And then I remember coming back after 4 years and seeing him, and we were very much the same kind of person. It's really interesting. And you could say a lot was about the environment of where we grew up, but also maybe even our learning habits at that point. And we both were very resistant to school. And to the way that the modern construct of education is, or especially as it was at that point. And neither one of us learned well, I don't think, until we actually started getting away from that. And then learning really became something we could thrive in, because it was something we could, there was no structure around it. It was like learn at your own pace and learn as much as you want. And so I think that's what gave us focuses. And it's interesting that both of us became martial artists and we really fought a lot. I definitely was fighting a lot to prove who I was at that point in time, and so was he. We both have an interesting dynamic in that we've lost a parent. I lost a parent when I was 5. My father passed away, and this sort of set the stage for my life, especially my young life, and how I was brought up, and it was, you're living one way and then all of a sudden your life is totally shifted in a different direction, almost like a nightmare type of scenario. And this might have been reasons for disorganization and trauma, a few years later when we were pigeonholed into these classes. And interestingly enough, at that time I was going through something internally, puberty, and I was hitting a hormonal stage where I felt just a tremendous amount of rage at what I was going through and just the loss of control. I pretty much my entire young life, I never felt like I had any control over anything that I was doing. And there was a ton of escapism. And so when I had to reconnect into reality, it was difficult in certain ways. I lived in my imagination and through things like music. And, and this is pretty much what formed my adolescence, was trying to find out who I was with this past trauma kind of haunting me and having a ton of rage to deal with. And then growing up in an area that sort of fueled it. I mean, I can just, there was just a lot of fighting around me. There was I was kind of into the hardcore punk scene when I was a kid. And so I liked hard music. I liked to go to shows where there was a good bit of violence. And so there was a lot of fighting. And then there came some legal trouble because of the fighting. And so, I basically had to kind of refigure my life in certain ways. And this actually started my path to, I believe, good learning, was just clearing away from an old life and getting into a new life of exploration and, having great instructors, like searching out guys that could influence me. And this, I kind of Forrest Gumped my way around, just learning from one person and then learning from another person, and then realizing like my whole life that I had been missing this thing, like no one was teaching me. And I started just absorbing information at an exponential rate and trying to unify the things, see from a certain perspective of how the things that my interests were connected, because maybe on the surface, like you said, they might not seem connected, but they really do overlap. And now they've coalesced into something that I feel I can teach and show. And I have picked up, some credible, accredited knowledge, from certain people who say, yeah, he knows what he's doing or whatever. But I think more is at the core of what underlies this whole thing, which is, to me, and it's in my business name, it's simple, it's body and mind, and it's this unification process of these things, because I realized when I was a youngster, I didn't have this connection, and this was that disorganization. There was no, the insight and the action weren't lining up properly. And I figured out that this was due to my nervous system being imbalanced. And so where I'm at now is in, years of training the nervous system to find some balance and some harmony so that I could put myself in a better place to operate and, come from a place where I could be functional for the people who were depending on me, you know? And so that's kind of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. There's so many points I'd like to touch on there. And first of all is, was there a particular moment that you realized there was a gap between the body and mind, or was it a growing realization?
After a healthy dose of 5 grams of psilocybin, I had a pretty good insight that I was not there.
How old are you then?
Oh, man. Well, this is an oscillation of in and out of massive doses, if this makes sense. So the first time that I put myself into that space, I was 15. I had just been pulled out of my life. I had just established myself. It sounds really stupid, but when I was young, and Mark will tell you this, I mean, there was a lot of fighting. You know, I say that kind of over and over again, but there really was. And this sort of kind of put me at a place with a lot of people. And, you know, now I kind of realize I'm a runt, and I got away with a lot, maybe more scare tactic than actually having to prove myself. But the thing was, is I kind of developed a friends and network of people that, you know, believed in me, and I had a good thing going, if that makes sense. And then my freshman year of high school, I get moved 2 states away, or a state away, pretty much 2 states away, and put in a situation where I knew no one. And first day of school, I get beat up really bad by a guy, and so it changed the whole dynamic of my life. And this all happened, I was about 15, and maybe a month or so later, I'm trying to figure out, you know, where I'm at in life. I am not in a good place. And I get a hit of acid, and it changes my perspective on everything. And it was so massive. And it was, you know, there was these insights coming to me, and they were terrifying me. And I had no idea what I was seeing. I had no idea. I couldn't comprehend it at all. So, you know, these things really changed my perspective on everything that I thought was going on around me, though. And I knew that there was a rabbit hole at that point, but I wasn't interested in it. And honestly, I got away from it, and I turned to sports and athleticism, and I really hid from that type of thing until I got to be about 17 years old, and music and bands were really calling to me, and I started playing in my first band, and then it all started to kind of happen again, started to be introduced to this type of thing. And you know, whenever I would have these experiences, they would be so profound and so life-changing, but they weren't integrated. You know, they were honestly terrifying, but I would do them again and again, kind of here and there, and I wasn't learning anything. And then along came the internet, and insights. I started learning from other people. And I'm an internet junkie, and I started listening to guys like Terrence McKenna, and I was interested in what he was talking about. So I decided to explore Terrence's ideas to the best of my abilities. And with that, you know, these insights started really coming to me, and they were very simple. And it was, get your shit together, and this is how you should do it. And then I started guiding myself by those insights. And I started finding that I was living a much cleaner, healthier, more cognitive existence. And I believe now, after seeing the scientific evidence that's there for psilocybin, that there were a lot of neural connections being made that were giving me the ability to better perform. And so moving in and out of these deep experiences and learning how to integrate them became sort of an obsession. Like, what more can I learn? And then I realized that was the wrong way. And so I realized it was important to actually step away from all of that and to start figuring out how to do it without needing any type of stimulation, and finding it endogenously. And that's when some more trauma came my way. And my wife went through something really traumatic, and I had to help her through it. It caused us both a lot of suffering. And when we moved through that, I was left again in this space where I think I was too much in my sympathetic nervous system. I couldn't figure out how to unwind. I brought all my tension with me everywhere I went. And then I found Wim Hof, and I got into the ice, and everything changed for me. And so that was the ultimate time of knowing body and mind could be completely integrated, because I figured out how to turn on and off through this technique certain aspects of my nervous system. And I really felt that energy that I believe Wim puts forward, because it's genuine, which is bringing the heart and the mind together to operate at a higher, maybe you could say higher, I would say higher level of cognition than someone who is not doing that, from someone who is separated, from someone who is dealing with the drama of their heart intellectually, instead of just letting it all kind of synchronize, and I believe this is, true body and mind. Like, I'd never found it in any way, shape, or form like I have through the Wim Hof method. And so that was the real teacher in all of that.
That's amazing. Again, there's so many points to go from on that. But I think there's a couple that I want to bring up. First one would be, how did your physical culture change throughout that? And I know there were lots of intermediate steps in there, but how did the way you looked at your own body and the way you performed change as you went through that?
And I still had some pretty bad habits from my youth, like sugar, like an addiction to sugar, not looking for the quality that I began to recognize and as being so important. So right away, there was actually a ton of struggle, because it was, I had been doing things one way, but honestly, I can swear by this, that's the best I can give you. It's pretty anecdotal, but the physiological changes of using psilocybin essentially seem to erase certain types of neural connectivity that might be linked to addiction. So things in some ways were a real struggle, but that actually was more from I went through this back and forth between, should I eat meat? Shouldn't I eat meat? And I could go into that a little bit, because I grew up in a hunting culture, and, I was struggling so much so that a vegetarian, I should say really all vegan raw, I'll give them a shout out, Luna's Living Kitchen here in Charlotte, North Carolina, might have arisen from these struggles. Maybe I shouldn't connect them, but anyway, it's too late. So the thing that happened was there was an intention struggle of what should I do, but I knew right away, like, I shouldn't be going to McDonald's. I knew right away that there was nothing that was going to, there was no quality in cheating myself. So I started to eat better. And I mean, right away, there was also like, and a lot of people have told me this. I mean, there was like a volume that was turned up, a level of intensity that came over my desire to do just about anything that I was intent on doing. And so there was just a really solid focus. And I think that mixed with knowing that this fire is there, that there's an intention there driving, like a will there to do it, and having the discipline that I had created through doing martial arts, through trying to become organized through this whole thing, because I realized it was so important. And then through a lot of really weird shit, man, that I won't take you all through, because it's maybe for a different type of podcast. I'm almost nervous to, I don't want to embarrass myself, because, you know, there are things, and everybody, I think, who's ever experimented with these types of substances knows that there are some very strange synchronistic type of events that occur. And when these things occur, you know, you can't take a picture of them. It's hard. It's hard to get people to understand what they are, but it's almost like a guiding intention that shows you ways if you're paying attention. And, you know, I'm a big fan of Jung. I believe that the synchronicity exists. I just think that, you know, you have to be very careful in how you try to interpret things like that. So it was for sure bringing me into a stronger place. Like, I just had the desire to train all the time. I was teaching Jiu Jitsu pretty nonstop and training nonstop. And there was not a lot of Jiu Jitsu culture around me in the area that I was in. So we were helping to try to kind of create that. And, you know, we spawned some pretty cool things. There were MMA organizations that came out of, you know, under my banner. There were a lot of different things that were taking place. There were a lot of fighters that kind of moved through and trained with me at various times. And so there was a lot of fun, and it was intense. And it was, you know, it was sort of my secret weapon, my trade secret. It wasn't something I talk about like I do now, because I'm not really there with it like that anymore. I feel like I've used it, and now I'm trying something new. But at that time, it was fueling me. And this went on for about 6 years. So I got a lot of experience while we were in this. And I think it turned something on in me that will forever be there. But you need to learn to harness it, you know. So, you know, that, I guess, you know, I just noticed the changes occurring through that. At the same time, I was getting married. I was, I don't know, I was feeling in my peak. It was like, it felt like the best time of my life. I mean, I just felt like a king, and I didn't have much. I didn't need much. You know, I just needed the training and the quality of food. I would only buy, you know, it had to be the best. We started going to farms. We only would shop with local growers. I mean, literally going to the growers, buying from them their food, you know. It started to become this holistic thing where you wanted to be closer to nature, and nature was fueling this thing. It was really, there's a call to arms, you know, when you're doing this, that, you know, to just be empowered, and to know that you should be empowered, and that you should forgive yourself. And this was a tremendous time of redemption for me, and also just absolute and utter ego destruction. You know, I couldn't balance. There were so many things that were unbalanced, like in questions that I had about myself. So there was a lot of humility, and that became even more something to give me the drive to go forward. The reasoning to know that I just don't know shit, and that I'm lost as anybody else. You know, I have this energy. I feel this thing. I can think clearly. I can see clearly. You know, I could run faster. I could move better. But I knew that I just was, you know, a student here, you know, and that I'm just trying to figure it out. And but I knew my nervous system in a way was getting balanced. But now, after doing all the studying with the Wim Hof, understanding what we're actually doing, I can really put it into context. Then I couldn't have. Then it was all feeling. Then it was a lot of almost like glossolalia kind of nonsense talk in my head that I just understood myself. Nobody else needed to understand it. I knew what I was thinking. But now I can put it into the context of the nervous system and know that, you know, how we were stimulating the nervous system, and knowing that we, you know, are essentially moving in and out of the sympathetic and the parasympathetic, and that, you know, it creates a stronger, more balanced homeostasis that gives you more resilience towards everything, you know, so that when your baseline is stronger, everything is just easier, you know. And I just felt like maybe I just felt like I could see through my own bullshit. So it was easy to see through other people's bullshit. And I honestly started steering clear of a lot of stuff. A lot of people were thinking that I was becoming a hermit, but honestly, man, I just needed to be away from certain people, you know, and so this was all, you know, this all changed my physiology. This all changed who I am. I think you could actually witness it, through pictures. You know, you could actually see my, everything change. I went through and did a massive 12-day fast of no food, just water. You know, I mean, guys have done a lot longer, but I was also training twice a day.
Oh, wow.
So I was just seeing how I could push myself. I lost 45 pounds. I went from about 190 down to about 155. And then I just kind of kept going down, and I managed to kind of hold my weight at about 150, 155 for a while. And it was just all through this process, but I never felt so strong. You know, I was pulling off like one arm pull-ups, and I was doing things that I could never have imagined that I could have done. And it was just through intensity and training, and, you know, so it was a good time. And it was an awesome time to be alive, you know, and I still feel that way. I'm more worried about things now, though, than I was, because I've got 2 kids, and I look at the world now, and I don't depend on anything else for energy except for what I can bring forward in myself, you know, at this point. And I think that is, you know, everybody's got to have a journey. This is kind of what I feel like is my spiritual journey towards, you know, going to this next half of my life, or next part of my life. And so, you know, so I feel like in a way this was all a preparation to launch me to the next platform. And what has happened so interestingly is that I have lined up with some people that are amazing and have the same interests as me, and have a great outreach, and can, you know, and influence, and deservedly so. And, you know, are kind of seeing the same, you know, image and vision. And I mean, and we all come from different places. Some people have come from some really rough places more recently than I have, and, you know, and some from better. And, you know, we've just been able to see that there's this commonality, no matter where you are in life, of certain specific desires that seems underlie, you know,
our nature. And it seems like when they come forward, they give us a tremendous amount of power, and they boost. And there's a cascade of chemical benefits internally that, you can get into, but I still like to look at things as just the surface and see how people change and better respond. I tend to be the hungry kid that won't eat. That was always my persona in life. The hungry kid that won't eat, but when he would eat, everything would change, and I see that in one of my sons now, and it's powerful because it really speaks to the genetics, but I have a better way of handling that now with him. I can help him ease through it, I think, better. And, I see that resistance in a lot of people, but with these people that I'm working with, I don't see that with them. I see them as like they've let go, and in certain ways they realize there is a big idea here for all of us to get behind, and to start trying to push each other in a way that can help us maybe move forward in a more beneficial to the species, which I hate to bring that kind of big idea into it, but it's true that, even if it's in small pockets, we can see how little things can affect big things, just to try and help. I don't care if it's one person or whatever. It's the idea is that you move the energy forward and we try to help. And that's sort of where I am in life now. And I feel that, the best way to do it is to present people with an experience that can lift them up and can be explained to them why they feel it, that's totally interactive. And that's what we're trying to present now. We're trying to bring, coalesce these ideas of the Wim Hof method with all these other maybe vagal type of strengthening, toning exercises that I believe, because I believe the Wim Hof method is the ultimate tool for training the vagal system. And when you see Wim, you can just see that that's what he's done to himself. And he just bounces all around, and he has this type of energy that, is, just so youthful. And it feels like when you understand maybe what the vagal response is supposed to give you, these various benefits it's supposed to give you, you realize he's embodying all of this stuff. And so, and in total reverence to him and respect, because I have that for him, I feel the desire to take what he's doing and turn up the volume as much as people can take, because that's what I like.
Nice.
So to each their own, man. I love my music loud. To use a line of Terrence McKenna, I live by the rules that if you don't feel like you took too much, you probably didn't take enough. The mindset that let's just fucking go for it, man, because in the end, this shit is so good. Let's do the scary shit together because we're going to turn on all of this good stuff in our body, and then we can have fun together. It's like train the nervous system, get yourself right, and then you realize there's no reason for a conflict. Right. And so we can, and then what are we working for? I think for some really cool space age shit, man. Like I'm all into going into that thing, like the idea that we need to, transmute this plane of existence, man, and move forward into a deeper level of consciousness that is there, I think for all of us. And I think the way to do it is to balance ourselves and learn how to work as tribal units and, and escape the competition culture from the angle of we're necessarily going against each other to keep each other down, but we're going against each other to make each other better has to become the idea. You know, that thing that it's all got to be about elevation and fuck the hater, you know. And we have to take it to the next level, because all of this, you know, and it's first world problems, the hater, but it exists, you know. And I refuse to even engage in it, man. We must go beyond it, you know, in that way, and get to a point to where you move in and out of these particular nervous system things in order to better yourself. You know, that is your CrossFit culture. That culture is a beautiful example of what I'm talking about, because CrossFit it brings people together, and it does push people to go further, and it does train, you know. I mean, it's taken a lot of hate too, you know, and who cares? You know, there's going to be good and bad instructors everywhere. That's just the nature of life. Not everybody is great. But I think, you know, that doesn't mean the culture shouldn't exist and it shouldn't move forward. And I think it's, you know, I think it's a great example of what I'm talking about. I think it could be built upon just like everything else, you know. I think we're missing some key elements, because maybe in some ways, you know, or at least what I'm interested in and how I'm interested in training people. I can't tell anybody that they're wrong for what they do. I think everybody should do what they like. You know, my path is my path. So I feel like if I judge you, you know, I'm doing it wrong. You know, just do what you like. But, you know, we can look and see from observations that certain things seem to get better results. And so I feel that, you know, when you find out what you really enjoy, and you know, and you're driving for it, you know, that the, you know, I guess the creation of what you're bringing forward, in my opinion, needs to be connected to our environment in different ways. So I'm really into the idea that the, you know, I mean, obviously we start with the breath and the Wim How Method, and this is a good concept and construct to get around, you know, isolating the breath in order to better understand your space and, you know, your body. But, you know, that bleeds into everything that we do. And honestly, I think if we isolate, we don't have to consider it as much while we're in the midst of doing other things. We kind of know that we're out of breath, or we kind of know that our breathing is imbalanced, you know, if we're not. And honestly, if you just train breathing, your breath should just respond properly if you're doing the right training, in my opinion. But you know, I see this interaction with the environment initially through the breath, but then I see it being important as the stimulus that drives us. And I think this is the call that we all in some way have towards certain aspects of nature. And I think a lot of people are limited in their direct connection with nature. And, you know, God bless the people that get it all the time, because, man, that's awesome. I wish I had it all the time, you know, but I'm in a city as well. And so I'm always struggling to find these pieces of nature to get involved with, even if it's just putting bare feet on the ground, you know, to better understand myself, because I feel like it is just so integral in our human evolution. You know, we were these things for so long, and to be cut off as much as we are now, I do believe that there needs to be more of that integrated in to our, you know, our lifestyle.
Nice. If you're going to do that for a CrossFit athlete, or someone, just a general athlete who lives a kind of a modern lifestyle, how would you get that connection there now?
Well, I definitely think through the isolation of the breathing is a big one. I really think that is of the utmost importance for athletes. If you want to get the most out of your body, you really need to understand your breath work. And so I think that's a great way to start. You know, it's the reason that I gravitate towards the Wim How Method so much is because I have an ice bath in my studio. So that to me is something that I take on. It's just such a primal, hardcore stress that you can learn to become, that you can learn to harness your energy with. And it's the most unique training that I've almost ever found. Besides something like that, I think I do like the idea of training outdoors, even if it's swinging your kettlebells outside with bare feet. Maybe somebody would have a different idea than that, but I think that stimulates a lot. And I think, more and more training outdoors, which I know CrossFit embraces that a lot to a degree. You guys have running, you have things like that. I think running in the woods barefoot, I think, is a really good idea. Or on trails, whatever is accessible to you. It could be in a park, could be on I'm always chasing parks around with my kids, and we're always trying to find every little bit of nature that we can find. I like climbing trees. I mean, it might sound silly, but I think that dealing with the fear of getting up to a certain height, I like climbing in general, even if it's at a climbing center. Just pulling on plastic is great. So I know that, this is maybe not directly involved with what happens at a CrossFit studio, or it could be, I guess. But, I think the CrossFit athlete needs to cross-train. And I think that the balance is to understand there are so many things to look at, right, and to find what works for you. But I think having just a piece of something, everybody's doesn't have to be the same thing, but I think, you got to have something. So breathing fresh air would be probably the essential thing in my mind. If I didn't have good air to breathe, I would chase that. If I lived in a city where the air was bad, I would try to get out as much as I could and breathe. We have a place here that has we call it a mountain. It's kind of a mountain. It's close. It's got an elevation of about 400 feet on its face. And so I'll get up there and get a breath and really run the hill. It's close enough to get to. I'll run the hill and get to the top and breathe and just practice my breath training. I like to sit out on the edge, a little bit, and kind of just push my desire to stay alert of my surroundings. You don't have to be death-defying from every angle, but I think that getting into those stress responses is what nature provides in such a complex, beautiful way that it's hidden. You don't have to understand it. You could be an indigenous tribesman and not need to understand exactly the way your nervous system is working to understand the benefits. Much more connected, in my opinion, through feeling. I'm a feeling type person. I believe that, if you're going to be a great musician, you need to have an ear for music. You need to be able to feel and sense it. And then it will come out of you from your perspective, in my mind. And so, I'm all about creating my own thing. So you got to find what works for you. I use the breath. I use the cold water because the cold water gives you such a tremendous stimulation in such a short amount of time. You can get a tremendous amount of norepinephrine in the system, but maybe all that your body can handle, and all that it needs within 2 minutes of having your chest under at 32-degree water. So, I keep that type of water in my studio. So we're in and out of cold water. At least the athletes that train hard, we're in and out quite a bit. Guys who don't train quite as hard, we don't let them ice quite as much, but they don't need it as much. And, and it seems to be the right way to do it. I have not noticed any type of, ill effects from it. Everything has been positive completely. And that's why I'm just so taken by the whole thing. Like, I was never interested in becoming a Wim Hof instructor. It was never my desire in the beginning. I mean, I did this stuff because I needed something, and it helped me tremendously, and it's helped me continuously. It's like been a thing that's just grown. I mean, he's definitely had an impact, and I feel like I'm just now getting to know him. I've been around him several times, but I feel like now I'm just starting to really understand the man better and see where he's coming from. And, his method is solid. And so to me, this is a way an athlete can integrate training in right into their studio, breath work and ice. There's nature in a lot of ways. Open the door,
nice.
Sit out by the back door and breathe,
Yeah.
whatever it takes. You know what I mean? Just that's the type of thing that I think can start, we realize we're always in nature. It doesn't matter how many buildings we build and how close we live on top of each other. We're still always in nature. But now the dynamics are different because of the interaction of the human. We don't interact in the way that we would if we were surviving in nature. And that I think that dynamic is not something that we've lived with for very long. And it's created a lot of disarray, in my opinion. But,
absolutely.
So.
Yeah, where do you think a lot of people make mistakes, or what are the most common mistakes when it comes to breath work?
Well, I think if you're training your breath in any way, that's great. It's more about, it's the same thing I would say about martial arts. Train your martial arts, whatever you like, whatever works for you. But, there are definitely some ones that are superior to others in how fast they get their benefits and their responses. This is, again, brings me back to the Hall thing. I hate to sound like a broken record, but, he's put it to the test. A lot of people can say their yoga or their breath work methods, maybe their pranayama or whatever, their qigong or these things are superior. And there's now various different types of, methodologies that are out there that I find are constantly comparing themselves to how they're better than the Wim Hof method, which I always find fascinating. It's like, why are you always bringing up the Wim Hof method if you feel like it's obviously it's the one that's, a lot of people are looking at this point. And I think it's specifically because it's organized, and it's got some good minds looking at it. And like, whatever the art is that sort of has the people's eyes and hearts and minds, kind of like if you look at martial arts, I think of Brazilian Jiu Jitsu as being this art that is at the forefront sort of martial arts right now, because of a standalone art, they seem to really be pushing it to try and hit all these various angles. And, and this is what fascinated me about it. But also what fascinated me about it was that it's the oldest, it's the oldest art, maybe, the idea of two animals grabbing each other. And, and then what happens from there, and the recognition of what happens from there, and being a human, we can recognize a lot better. And I feel that, when you look at that construct, you're basically seeing now all these people looking at it and trying to influence it and change it in different ways. And honestly, I see that in the same thing with the Wim Hof method. Lots of people are looking at it, and lots of people have their ideas of how it could be this and how it could be that, right? And so my interest is always in distilling from the master's teaching, like, and I'm not calling Wim my master, but what I mean is the guy who created the method. So I look at Wim not as a guru, but as a coach. And when I see him doing certain things, I want to mimic it, which is what I think a good student does when he's trying to first learn something. So I was trying to mimic the things that I could gain from him in the small times that I would be able to extract from him being around him. But at the same time, I have a background in martial arts, I have a background in yoga, I have a background in Qigong. I know these things too. So I can see what I believe is overlap. And I can also see the idea of maybe what gives me my best results. I definitely feel like I can decipher what is giving me my best results. But I believe it's prescriptive, man, to answer your question. So, I don't believe that everybody is the same. And I don't believe everybody breathes the same. So when we teach the generic Wim Hof method, and not to call it generic in a bad way, but to just say the standard breath training technique, Wim says, breathe however you can, right? Well, you're going to have some people who say, well, you should breathe a certain way. And then you're going to have other people who say, well, it's okay to breathe this other way. It doesn't do anything bad to you. And honestly, we're after a specific result, which is acute respiratory alkalosis. This has a tremendous amount of benefits. And norepinephrine is connected in with it as well. The other stress hormones, pHing the system, and all these other various elements. So my question is not who has a bad method, but what does your method do, and what are you trying to do with it? And I would say this for anybody, for anything. So if you're trying to accomplish something, what is it? Do you want to get into your parasympathetic system? And paradoxically, can you get there in the way that Wim says, by stimulating the sympathetic in order to de-escalate from it, so you learn to quickly get into it? Nice. Versus say, I'm just going to breathe Zen style Chan, if you're Chinese, against staring at a wall, or have whatever your methodology is, or I'm going to breathe a certain Buteyko way, or I'm going to breathe however. I mean, there's a million whatever ways, but what are you trying to do? If you don't know that, I think you're lacking. It's like not putting your fighting to the test, your martial art to the test. If you can't grind it out a little bit, which is why I honestly kind of like the CrossFit games and things like that, because it's the same thing. I mean, you're putting it to the test. Why not? And, I think that, it's just important to understand what you're doing. So if I was to tell people what their biggest mistake was at first, I would say you're not conscious enough. Mm-hmm. So the only way to become conscious is to try and breathe maybe a lot of different ways, or you can pick a style, like I feel like I have done, that encompasses a lot of different things. Because the breath work will be tested different ways against different stresses. I have to breathe a certain way when I climb versus I have to breathe a certain way when I get into cold water. Cold water hits me immediately. Climbing doesn't do that to me. Climbing is like an in and out sort of thing, or pacing myself, trying to trek altitude fast. One of my favorite things to do is to, push myself against the hill and try to get up a hill quick, And so if I'm going to do that, I want to be able to see that my breath work is responding to whatever it is that I'm doing. So if I'm not getting the benefits that I feel like, if I'm doing this meditation thing, but I'm getting pissed off in traffic and I don't know how to de-escalate, then it's not working, because it's got to be functional on all levels to me. I need to be able to play with my toys always. I hate to have something that I can't abuse other than my wife. So I want to have my toys and keep them, worked. And so if my breath method doesn't respond in my training, if it doesn't respond in traffic, if it doesn't respond when I get in the ice, if it doesn't do all these things, it's not for me. I need something stronger. I defer to, my dose is not big enough. Give me more. The Wim Hof method has knocked me unconscious on multiple occasions. It's done things to me that other methods could never come close to. It's given me crazy visions. And I don't want to go too deep into talking about it, but I just didn't know endogenously it was possible to stimulate the way that this method does. It's just, if you get after it, like, it's funny because I just helped to instruct the last group of instructors that came through the Wim Hof certification process. So we were all out in Colorado. I was with Casper and Dr. Tricia Smith. I was with Wim and Isabel Hoff, and we were out there working the last group, or this past group of instructors through. And it was a week-long experience, and I witnessed so many things going on. There was so much stimulus to that, and I was able to, see how people were training their method at an intense level, which, last year or 2 years ago, I was a student kind of in their same place. And so now it was so cool to come back as this year and see the new group coming through and us being able to work hard. And we do some pretty hard stuff, man. We push it. We get up in altitude, we get in cold water, we're working. It's the coldest they'll ever be. So, but it's maybe at least it's the coldest they've ever been. So, it was the same for us, but with the perspective of watching the group and seeing how they do it, man, these people were getting after it. They were really trying to get something out of the method. And I'm like, yeah, this is, and when you see that, you realize okay, I mean, yeah, they're going to try to influence it at some point, but this is what it has to be. You have to go after it. You have to try and push it to the next place, through the hard work. And I've just never seen, I don't know what it is, man. I've never seen a movement like this, that is brings these super intense people together in various ways, because they don't all have to be from an athletic background, but there's an intensity to them to do this. A lot of people are from an athletic background, in the teachers' courses especially, but they are just in there pushing themselves, getting the results that they know are there, and you can see them going through this cathartic thing that makes them vulnerable, which is an interesting space, because you got to let down the exterior with this stuff in a way. It's going to push you in a really unique way. That's, again, I say it's humbling. And I think that is like a theme in my life, that when I can find something that I respect so much, that I begin to revere, I'm just at awe, and I don't even try to explain it. I just say it's more than me. I want to do it. It's like Jiu Jitsu. It's like music. I mean, it's like these certain things that have just grabbed me in my life.
That's
and,
yeah.
And so yeah, so I don't know.
That's it's fascinating. I'd love to do a Joe Rogan style 4-hour interview with you and just listen, because what you have to say is super important. However, we've just run up on an hour, and that's the podcast length. But man, honestly, we'll have to do either a part 2 and 3, or when I'm in the States next year, we'll have to organize our schedules, and we'll do a 3-hour or something like that.
Absolutely. I really appreciate your platform. I think your work is so awesome. One of the key concepts to the Wim Hof method is mindset. I mean, it's 3 components: water, breath, and mindset. And that is just the most crucial thing. Through this whole thing with me, it's all been about formulating my mindset to be balanced, so that I could do what I knew was in my heart to do. And so it becomes a mind and heart thing, body and mind thing. And I appreciate the time, man. I really do.
No, it's been really good fun. Tell people where they can find out a bit more about what you do, and maybe watch some videos. There's a few fantastic videos on YouTube, I think. And find out a bit more about you.
Well, right now, Instagram and Facebook are my friends. We're really starting to bring things out more into the public eye. This was something I hid for a long time. And it wasn't for any other reason more than just my own personal experimentation. I was just really into what I was doing, and I didn't have time to think about anything like this. So I'm such a dinosaur, man. I'm getting into the whole social media thing really strong. We have a dated website that we're making better currently with a new website designer. So that's going to be up really soon. Dojo Body Mind is my website. We have Brandon Powell on any social media with Facebook and Instagram. Instagram seems to have better algorithms, so we're putting a lot of our videos out through Instagram. You can follow my business on Instagram, which is Dojo Body Mind, or me, and we're going to pull everybody along. We're also creating a nice members page. We already have several members on there. It's private now, but we're going to make everything public, and we're going to share everything and really try to just make it, all of our information as much open source as we can. And then we want people to come and have the experience with us. We will travel. We will push it. We're musicians. We're fucking hardcore gypsies, man. We bring a powerful show that mixes all kinds of awesome energy, but also teaches you how to do the Wim How Method. And, in my opinion, gives you so much to work with and play with, and it just grows from there. So, pay attention to us because we're just now getting started. We've got some really cool stuff coming down the pipe in the next, I would say the next month. So, just stay with us, okay?
Thank you for listening to another episode of the Mindset RX series of the Alpha Movement Podcast. My name is Tom Foxley, and you can find out more about the Alpha Movement Podcast and Mindset RX all over social media. So facebook.com/Alpha Movement Official. You can just Google Mindset RX and my name, Tom Foxley, to find all of that stuff. You can head to mindsetrx.com. You can find out a bunch of information all over the place. Best place, Instagram @Tom Foxley, and facebook.com/ or either /Tom Foxley or /Alpha Movement Official. And of course, you can access my books all over Amazon, on my website, mindsetrx.com, all that kind of stuff. And I shall see you very soon for another episode of the Mindset RX series of the Alpha Movement Podcast.